We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
Well, this week we're going to do an introduction to a series that we're planning, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to find those leads, whether it is going to cost you more time or more money.
Right. How many times have you heard there's no deals out there? We hear this from newer investors all the time. There's just no deals out there. How are you guys finding deals? Well, we're going to discuss all the different ways you can find deals over the next few episodes, and we're going to kind of group them up into similar type strategies. And this week, we're going to just kind of give an overview of what we're going to cover and what some of these strategies look like, and just kind of talk a little bit of a high level about how they work, and then we'll dig into these specific strategies over the next few weeks. One thing I want to like you mentioned, Jack, was, either you have time or money, right? Most people don't have an abundance of both. So we're kind of dividing these up into which ones require more of your time, but not a lot of money, and which ones require more money and less time. So that's kind of the scale that we're putting these on.
Yeah, and as we're talking about these two, and Josh mentioned this in our monthly real estate meetup recently, we're going to be throwing a lot of information out at you here on a few things, especially over the next few episodes. But what's really important, and we've mentioned this before, it's better to focus on one or two strategies and get really good at that and push all of your effort into that couple activities instead of spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, that's a huge point. You really need to think of this list of strategies as a buffet, right? You go up and you pick one or two things that you will actually do. That's the most important thing, is what can you actually commit to, and just master that, and try not to get FOMO, the fear of missing out, or the shiny object syndrome, or the grass is greener, and really commit to a strategy or two and let it ride for, 6 months or a year, and really try to tweak it and get it performing as best you can. And historically, that's going to give you much better results than if you try to execute 10 different strategies all at once and not do any of them very well. So kind of have that in mind as we're talking about all these different strategies of finding deals. And really, look inside yourself and see what resources do I have that I could execute any of these effectively, and if so, which are the best ones suited to my personality and the resources I have available to me, whether that's time, money, or whatever combination of those.
So on a high level, let's start with less money, more time.
Right. So a lot of newer investors, they'll come up to me and they'll say, how do you find deals? And I'll say, well, do you have a lot of money? I'll just jokingly say, well, just go buy like 10 rentals, for a couple $1,000,000 and you'll be set. And they say, well, I don't have any money. Well, so then you're working on the more time, less money side of the scale. So that's when you kind of need to get out there and grind and put your time on the streets finding the deals. So let's talk about a few of those. Number one is driving for dollars. Now, I remember when I first started, I heard about this term and I did not know what it meant, didn't know how to execute it, what to do to actually make that happen. I kind of tried my own, and I guess this works too, and there's a lot more efficient ways to do it, but I would just kind of, as I was coming to and from the office, I would take different routes than my normal routes and try to identify a property that looked like it needed some work or was possibly vacant, and write down the address, and then just trying to figure out, okay, now how can I get a hold of the owner of this property to see if they'd be interested in selling? And really, that's how I understand driving for dollars. Now, there's a lot more efficient ways of doing it. They make apps like Deal Machine. We had the creator of that on the podcast a while back. That's an app where you can drive around, take pictures of a house, and it'll automatically send mailers out to the owner. That's a pretty slick way of doing it. So give me your impression of driving for dollars, Jack.
Well, I think Deal Machine really does help with that, and I know it's becoming a pretty popular app, especially with the real estate community. And to kind of give you a nutshell, you can take a photo of that property as you're driving by, and you can kick off a postcard right there off of your phone. I mean, I don't think you can make it any easier than that. However, you got to watch out for some of that, because if you rely heavily on that, Deal Machine can start to get a little pricey on you too.
Right. So let's say you literally have no money, but lots of time. So you write down the address of a couple, let's say you make a list of 10 properties you see, and you want to somehow reach out to the owners. I guess it depends on your municipality. You can look them up on the tax records and send them a letter, right?
Yeah. And we've done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of driving for dollars. We'll delve a little deeper into that when we cover that on a specific episode. The next one is door knocking. Now, this is similar to that. Instead of writing down the address, you could stop and literally go up to the house and knock on the door, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you had a neighborhood where you really like to flip, or would be a good neighborhood to flip in, you can just draw a box around that neighborhood and just start knocking on doors and saying, would you like to possibly sell your house? And, that requires a lot of confidence and a pretty thick skin. But that's basically door knocking. So we'll cover that more in depth as well.
And one of those things that we didn't talk about before, but we could add to probably door knocking, is just making those cold calls.
Yeah, cold calling.
Yeah, you're dialing those numbers, and frankly, that's kind of a quick little tip. You don't even need to do what we call skip tracing in some of these people. There are still people who actually have, believe it or not, landline phones, and they're found in the white pages.
Yeah. I mean, you might as well try. And a lot of times, a little bit older demographic, maybe they're looking to downsize. They, have a lot of equity in the house. There might be some intersection of attributes that could work in your favor there. So it's worth trying, and it's absolutely free. It just takes your time to try to look up who owns the house and give them a call. Now let's talk about bandit signs DIY. So this will fall into the more money and less money categories, but bandit signs DIY would be bandit signs you make yourself and put out yourself. Now, you can literally take cardboard, write on it with a marker, and to make a wood stake and pound it into locations around town. I mean, that's about as cheap as it gets for a marketing strategy, but that is very time intensive.
Yep.
But it works, and a lot of people have started that way.
In fact, I'd say the rougher the sign, the more attention it typically gets.
Exactly. Sometimes a slickly produced sign will be less effective. So I know that a do-it-yourself bandit sign can totally work. Also, yellow letters DIY. So that, we mentioned that in the driving for dollars and door knocking strategies. This would be basically where you target houses that you'd like to possibly purchase, figure out who owns them, and mail them letters. And these are letters you're writing yourself. They call them yellow letters. You can just Google them, look it up, and see what they look like. And it's basically just a fairly carefully crafted language stating that you'd be interested in possibly buying their house. Give me a call at this number. And actually, the more personal and the more handwritten, again, the better, right? But that takes a lot of time if you're trying to target a bunch of people.
Let's jump over to search engine optimization.
Okay, so getting kind of technical here. And, again, you need to assess the resources you have available to you. And if you're not tech savvy at all, this is probably not something that you're going to be able to execute. But if you have a lot of time and are fairly tech savvy, what does it cost to get a domain name and a website up? Not much, right?
No, not at all.
I mean, you can throw a website up real easily. Just use a template-based site, WordPress or Squarespace or any of those very, very cheaply. Get your domain name that works in your market, and then start writing blogs. And if you write blogs about how to sell your house and reasons you could sell quickly, or you should sell quickly and without an agent, all that kind of content, if you just regularly publish content like that, eventually you're going to start to show up in the Google results organically without having to pay. But that does require typically a lot of effort and just some time, because they're constantly changing those algorithms and how to appear high in the search results. But it's something you can definitely execute.
And something that I think actually goes along with that is social media. If you're going to be writing that content and pushing that out to a website, especially in blog posts, you'll want to take advantage of social media, get some more eyes on that content, whether it's on Facebook. I'd even put YouTube into that and a few other places. It's really important to link back and get that consistency going.
Yeah, social media is one of the highest ROI things you can do. If you're just out in front of it, let's say you have a flip, how easy is it to just pop on your Facebook Live and just go live in front of a house? It's a great way to for market flips that you're working on. It could be for anything though. You could just stand in front of anything, really just a generic background, and say, hey, and just kind of do a mobile bandit sign web ad. Just say, this is me, I'm looking to buy houses, and I can help with this, this, and this. If you did that once a day, you're going to get some attention, and eventually you're going to get people reaching out to you with possible leads. And that is literally free. It just takes some of your time, and so easy to do and very effective, honestly. I think it's one of the least utilized and underutilized strategies that newer investors have available to them.
So we're probably going to go in a lot more detail into that as we've been experimenting with a few things, and I think we found some pretty decent tips and tricks lately.
Mm-hmm.
So now on the flip side, what do you do if you have more money but less time?
Right. Now, who would represent, who's represented by this category? Let's say you have a full-time job, you're a high income earner, and you want to get into real estate, but you don't have the time to do it. You can't be driving around, writing down addresses, making bandit signs yourself. You just do not have the time, but you do have some cash saved up, or you have a decent income. Then you want to leverage other people's time to execute some of these strategies. And really, at the top of that list is the MLS. You could buy properties off the MLS. Why not? They're provided for you in a nice searchable format. You can just go there and start making offers. That is pretty easy to do, but understand that the MLS is where properties typically go for the highest amount. So, you're paying a little more, but that is, balanced out by not having to put a lot of time into it. So definitely a strategy to look at.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody, too, is that make sure that if you're offering on the MLS, there's a couple quick strategies there. Run your numbers and offer your profitable number and try to stick to it. Do your best to stick to it. And I know even how embarrassing that might feel, get through that mental hurdle, because I guarantee you, what you're going to do there is just the consistency and taking that action. You'll eventually see results.
Exactly.
You're probably going to end up putting in twice as many offers to find that one deal off the MLS, but in the end, it's still there and available to you. Just being consistent and persistent.
Also, the people that come up to us and say there's no deals out there, this is where they're looking. And you need to remember that there may not be a deal at the price they're asking. So you figure out the price that works for you and offer that. It's that simple. Let's move on. Wholesalers. So basically you're paying a chunk of money for someone else to do all the legwork and serve you up the deal on a silver platter for a fee. And that fee can range, depending on your market, a couple grand all the way up to 20, 30 grand, in some higher price point markets. And really, honestly, it doesn't matter as long as the deal as presented to you still has enough meat on it where you can make money. Then happily pay a wholesaler to find those properties for you.
Yeah, and don't get hooked up or held up by buying from a wholesaler, because you don't think that maybe they deserve that amount of money or what have you. You got to make sure that the numbers work for you, and if it's a good deal for you, jump on it because somebody else will.
Yeah, and remember that those wholesalers spent a lot of either time or their money finding those deals in the first place too, so they have a lot of expense involved in locating those properties. And even making, trying to find the ones they didn't get. For every property a wholesaler finds, there's 10, 20, 30 that they spent money and time on that they weren't able to lock up. So there's a lot of expense on the wholesaler side of things.
Well, how about joint ventures?
Right. So let's say you have some cash sitting around and you want to do a flip, but you do not have the time to execute it. If somebody, if you find the property, you put up the money, somebody else can kind of supervise it, do all the day-to-day supervision and kind of shepherding that to the closing table. That can be a great way to put that money to work. Do a couple flips a year with somebody that is willing to put some time in and be the boots on the ground for you. That can be a great partnership between two different types of investors.
Yeah, especially if somebody has found the opportunity and you just want to help fund and make some decisions around the rehab. I mean, it's just a really great opportunity to get into, especially if you're a flipper.
Exactly. Let's talk about bandit signs now. We mentioned these in the do-it-yourself, more time, less money section. Well, bandit signs, you can hire these out. And this is what we did, and I'll tell the story in more depth when we talk about this on a later episode. But there's people out there that are willing to put these signs out for you for a nominal fee. And again, you just need to be consistent in the strategy. And if you're willing to pay someone, order some certain number of signs a month and pay someone to put them out, that can be a great strategy.
We're going to put yellow letters into this group again. Just like the bandit signs, you can also hire services to just mail them out, print them, and even curate a list for you.
Yeah, if you have enough money, this can be completely done and automated. And when we say yellow letters, I guess we're talking about any type of direct mail, postcards, yellow letters, any form of direct mail would fall into this category. And if you just find between list source and a mail house, and sometimes the mail house will, like you said, curate the list as well. You just throw some money at them. They'll buy the list and make sure it goes out on a regular basis, and all you're doing is taking the calls.
Well, how about cold calling again? We talked and joked a little bit about people still being in the white pages, but you can go as far as to doing what's called skip tracing, and you can even have a service make those cold calls for you.
Yeah, if you have some money, you can buy a list of people you'd like to call and then have somebody you hire to call that list, just cold call and say, hey, would you be interested in accepting or at least hearing an offer on this property? And, that's going to be a ton of high level of rejection going on there, but it can generate leads for you. And then just funnel me the leads that are at least semi-interested, and then I'll talk to them. So you really filter out all the people that aren't interested, and you just go look at the properties where they are.
And you can kind of see that we have a kind of a system here when we're talking about some of these later things, because there's a lot of companies and services that are out there that will do all the heavy lifting for you on this type of stuff, especially with the next group, which would be pay-per-click, Google ads, Twitter ads, Facebook ads, you name it. You can get ads on all these platforms right now. There are companies that do specialize in this type of advertising and making the best use of those services and platforms.
Yeah, there's digital marketing firms, and you can just call one of them and say, I want to find leads on people that want to sell their house. And they'll create a campaign for you, and you can throw as much money at that as you want. And I know a lot of real estate investors, this is one of their main sources of leads is pay-per-click. And depending on the market, it can be a very expensive strategy, a very competitive strategy. But you just have to look at your market and see where you fall on that scale.
And then lastly, we can go very old school with some stuff like billboards and bus benches.
Yeah, billboards, bus benches, radio and TV. what we call the old kind of megaphone advertising, where you're not really targeting anyone specifically. You're just shouting from the rooftops, here's my brand, be aware of me, right? It's really just raising brand awareness. And if you have money, that can be a great strategy for building up your name and your brand, so that when you do call, let's say you're cold calling in conjunction with some of these old school advertising strategies, when you do call, then they recognize the name. You can say, I'm so-and-so from whatever your company name is, and they may have heard of it. And as you study advertising and marketing, when the consumer is aware of your brand, it increases that know, like, and trust, that we always reference, that's required for them to want to do business with you. So it can be effective, but you could throw as much money as you wanted at those strategies. And around town, Fargo here, I see, for realtors, I see a zillion bus benches still. I see tons of billboards. Not as much radio and TV. People seem to be focusing more on online and digital type strategies, but boy, it's still being used, in the realty game.
Yeah, well, when you think about it too, a lot of the people that we end up targeting for our marketing, they're old school, older generation, and they're probably still consuming that media. Just because we are in the digital age and we're used to being online, that doesn't mean that your sellers are.
Right. I could make the argument that if you bought some time on an AM station with a, hey, would you like to sell your house quickly, did a little radio ad on that goes on during the baseball game, or, during Rush Limbaugh or something, you're probably going to get some calls from that. I can't speak to the ROI. We haven't tried that strategy, but, I bet there's something that if you committed to it, it could definitely work.
So in summary, like we said, make sure you take stock in your resources and what's available to you, and focus on a couple things. I think a big thing that everybody has to remember is that it typically takes up to 7 or even 8 views and instances for you to be recognized, and it kind of sticks. Don't expect results on the first time out.
Exactly. And again, take stock of the resources you have available to you. Do you have time? Do you have money? What will you actually do? Like we said, pick 1 or 2 of these strategies and commit to it. If you can't do that, it's not going to be successful. If you're spread too thin, it's typically not going to work. And free bonus tip, follow-up is the best strategy you can implement for any of these strategies. If you commit to following up with the people that do respond to your marketing, by far that is the highest ROI strategy you can add on. So whichever one of these strategies you choose, if you commit to following up, that's going to just blow it up.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. The follow-up is a big key to a lot of the things that we do. And if you don't have a lot of time nor a lot of money, the absolute best targeted ad you can do is following up with those existing potential sellers.
Alrighty. Look forward to a series on all of these strategies upcoming soon.
Yep. Get ready to nerd out. We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you've found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by housedudes.com. Do you live in a good cash flowing market? If so, turnkey isn't the best choice for you. You should buy in your market. If you don't live in a great market for investors, where can you find profitable cash flowing properties? We love the Midwest, where prices are reasonable and the people are great. We personally invest here and have lived in the area all of our lives. So how does turnkey work? We find the property, we rehab the property, and we find you a tenant and place you under the care of our local property manager, who we trust with all our own investment properties. I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the contact form on housedudes.com and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. We have a limited supply of properties every month, so we can only sell to a select few qualified buyers. We'll see you on housedudes.com.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.